So, welcome to the second video of Israel Explained. Like I said, I'll be doing these every day, or trying to do these every day during the war. And I've gotten great response to the first one, and I had a bunch of questions. So what I'm going to do from now on, every time I post one of these, you can post questions at the bottom of the video, and I will answer them in the next one. Okay? So that'll be a habit that we'll be doing. In case you don't know me, I'm Ben-Ephraim. And here we go. So today we're going to talk about what happens after the war. A lot of people say should wait until the end of the war, see how it goes, no point in planning it out in advance. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that's not a luxury that Israel has. Some of that has to do with the fact that a lot of it needs to be planned in advance, but a lot of it also has to do with the diplomatic state of affairs. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about in this video. That's important to note that there really isn't much time until Israel needs to put a day after into effect. There's a lot of talk about the timetable. Politico said that the United States is pressuring Israel to finish the operation at the end of December. I've heard from better sources that they want Israel to stop the current phase of the operation in January. And then Israel will enter the mopping up phase, which will probably be much longer, by the way, of raids, killing leaders, so on, without the massive military operation that it's engaged in now. But it's important to realize these dates are not set in stone. Developments will affect them, and the Israeli policy towards the day after will affect them. And we'll talk about that. So there's several things that Israel can do to change or alter the amount of pressure that it's under to end the operation. One is prevent civilian casualties as much as possible, which I think Israel's not getting enough credit for doing, but has to continue to do. Civilians in Gaza must not be harmed as much as possible. Second, letting in humanitarian aid, which Israel generally has done, grudgingly, but has done, and that's allowed it more time. But also, and this is sort of an underrated aspect of it, having a clear picture of what the day after looks like. Because what a lot of people are concerned about, and understandably, is that Israel plans to stay in Gaza forever and possibly start building settlements. And the international community does not want that. And if the international community feels that that's where this is going, there'll be more pressure on Israel to stop and even to let Hamas stand so that Israel can't take that next step, which the international community deems as harmful. I see that as harmful too. Not as harmful maybe as letting Hamas stay in Gaza, but also very harmful. Needless to say that for Arab states, their support for this operation, which is already not public and quite tenuous, will plummet or become non-existent if it becomes clear that Israel plans to stay there and build settlements. That's why Israel has to have a clear exit plan. If it has a clear exit plan, it's much easier for people who don't view Israel as greater Israel that will occupy the West Bank and Gaza forever to support this operation. And that's the support that Israel needs in order to complete what it does. Now, of course, you can't divorce the question of what happens in the day after the war from what the goals of the operation are. Right? What Israel talks about destroying Hamas, toppling Hamas. What does that mean? Well, of course, destroying Hamas is misleading because Hamas exists in all sorts of places. It exists in the West Bank, and I'll talk about that. I have a question about that. It exists in Qatar. It has offices in all sorts of places. Hamas is not going to cease existing. Even in Gaza, it's not going to cease existing. So that's a little bit misleading. It's the ability to topple its political control and to severely curtail its operational military terrorist capabilities in Gaza as well. Those are the two things, right? So Hamas should have no political control in Gaza once this operation ends. That's what victory means. If Israel does that, it wins. If it doesn't, it loses. It's pretty simple in that regard. Only if Israel neutralizes Hamas as a political factor in Gaza can it even think about that next step of who's going to rule Gaza afterwards. Otherwise, Hamas is still in there, so it's not even a question. So that has to be done in order for there to even be a next step. Now, people have talked about various solutions for after. One thing that people have talked about is the UN controlling it, but of course, every Israeli knows the UN, not only is the UN a anti-Israel organization in many ways, but also, even when they mean well, they're incompetent. They don't have the political will to get things done. UN peacekeepers are not, even if they're well-meaning, even if they're from countries that Israel trusts, going to be able or willing to fight Hamas to the extent that that the IDF has done. And we see that right now with Hezbollah. Israel had an agreement to end the Second Lebanon War, and UNIFIL, the peacekeepers in Lebanon were supposed to keep the peace there, have done, I wouldn't say nothing, but have done very little to uphold that. Since the war in 2006, there have been 30,000 infractions of the peace agreement, and nothing, right? So that's not even a possibility. Some people have talked about Arab states taking it over. Well, first of all, no Arab state is going to want to take over Gaza. Gaza is, for all intents and purposes, a nightmare to police. That's why Israel left in 2005. And Israel doesn't particularly want to go back, but we'll talk about that. Israel can't govern Gaza in the long term for two reasons. First of all, the international community won't allow it. Second, and more importantly, it's not in Israel's interests. Israel will become, no matter what it does in Gaza, the target of terrorism. If they start micromanaging people's lives, the occupation there will become severe and will inspire a lot of resistance. A lot of Israeli soldiers will die. There's a reason Israel left in 2005. So you have a problem there. On the one hand, only Israel can guarantee stability. Only Israel can do the security operations that are necessary in Gaza. But on the other hand, their existence there is not tenable. So you need some sort of solution where Israel has security control, at least in the foreseeable future, and it doesn't have political control. And that brings us to a solution that is similar to what Israel has in the West Bank. What Israel has in the West Bank is not optimal. No one likes it, but it beats a lot of the alternatives. Israel isn't sitting in Nablus and isn't sitting in Ramallah, and unfortunately it's sitting in some parts of Hebron, but not in most of it. And that means that less Israeli soldiers die, and there's less confrontation between the population and Israeli forces. So the solution in Gaza needs to be something along the lines of the PA. Unfortunately, as we know, the PA has some serious problems. Problem number one, corruption. To say corruption is endemic to the Palestinian Authority is almost underrating it. The Palestinian Authority was created on a basis of corruption and kickbacks, taking international aid, using it for private accounts from the days of Arafat until today, which has led to a delegitimization of it among Palestinian society. Another problem with the Palestinian Authority, well, it participates in terrorism, mostly indirectly, but through two mechanisms. One, the education system that raises towards anti-Semitism, towards terrorism, and the other by rewarding the families of what they call martyrs, families of terrorists, after they've committed terrorist attacks. Israel does not want that model planted in Gaza. So that sort of leaves with two options. One is the creation of a new Palestinian mechanism for Gaza, possibly under Mohammed Dahlan, who was brought into Egypt by the United Arab Emirates in order to spearhead a new direction for Gaza. And the other, possibly more realistic, is to try to force the Palestinian Authority to reform. Israel has leverage now, or it will have leverage once it takes over Gaza. It can sit in Gaza for a while and demand reforms from the PA. the international community would also have to say it's not going to fund the Palestinian Authority unless it does reforms. And there's definitely been voices like that, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And Europe are the main funders. And that brings us back to why Israel needs diplomatic space in order to complete this operation successfully. The EU needs to be on board in trying to pressure and reform the Palestinian Authority. So Israel has to do a little bit of a carrot and a stick. On the one hand, its military possession of Gaza has to be leverage on the Europeans. But on the other hand, it also needs to show that it's willing to move towards a peaceful solution, towards even a two-state solution, towards allowing the PA in. So if it plays that game correctly, it can get a reformed Palestinian Authority. And of course, all this without foregoing the Israeli right to militarily police Gaza. So it's a very delicate dance that Israel has to play. Luckily, Israel has a lot of cards, right? It has the military possession, it has American support, and needs to maintain those two things. And Gaza must be, as part of this operation and as part of a sustainable long-term solution, demilitarized. The PA was given guns in the 90s, and that was understandable because their job was to police Hamas, but that's not going to work in the current climate in Gaza. If that's going to happen in Gaza, if there's going to be any armed Palestinian apparatus in Gaza, that has to be way in the future, once things have stabilized. That can't happen anytime soon. Now, Israel needs to be playing this delicate dance, like I said, but it's not. Instead, Prime Minister Netanyahu was saying the Palestinian Authority will not rule Gaza. And he's not willing to say what Israel should do. Now, Netanyahu is a very crafty diplomatic operator. So there's nothing I said in this video that he's not aware of, and how important it is for Israel to present its own vision and to use its leverage correctly. But politically speaking, right now saying in Israel, we're going to give Gaza to the Palestinian Authority is politically untenable. It's not just a question of the right-wing Ben-Gvir, Smotrich wing, which of course will be against that, but just normal Israelis. Even myself, I'm a liberal Zionist. I'm more Lapid than Netanyahu, more Gantz than Netanyahu. The idea of Israeli soldiers dying in Gaza in order to hand it over to the Palestinian Authority, which has participated in terrorism in various ways, is not a pleasant one for anyone. So when Netanyahu says that, it plays well politically, but it's more than that. He said on CNN that as long as he's prime minister, that's never going to happen. And that is very smart politically, because it implies if Gantz was prime minister, maybe it would happen. And that's a way to sort of salvage his reputation in the polls. Gantz's polls have gone down a little bit. I'm not sure it's related, but that's the kind of game that he's playing. But we need to remember that if Israel doesn't shape the day after in Gaza, someone else will. And whoever it is may not have Israel's best interests at heart. So Netanyahu or whoever replaces him need to have that in mind, and they need to shape the future of Gaza. So, okay, I said I'm going to answer questions. I got 3 questions from folks, and I'll do my best to answer. Izzy asked, I'm of the mind that the only way to turn this around long term is to change the education system in Gaza. I really think that's the only way. I'd love a video with your thoughts on how to get that done, and if you think that is possible. Well, I'm not going to do a whole video on that, at least not now, but I will answer the question. I think Israel has a lot of leverage over the Palestinian Authority. And the international community has massive leverage over the Palestinian Authority. They don't really have a sustainable amount of support among the population, which is very dangerous. But that also means that they're completely beholden to foreign donors. So if Israel can get foreign donors to condition aid to the PA on changing the way that Israel is portrayed, the way Jews are portrayed in the education system in Palestine, then it can make massive changes that will have consequences for the future. And here's the thing, right now, a lot of their major donors are amenable to it. The world is seeing the results of the generations of hatred that the Palestinians have intentionally bred, and they don't want a part of it. A lot of European countries have cut their ties to UNRWA after the United States did under Trump. So this is a moment where Israel absolutely can put leverage in order to change the education system. And it has to be done now, it has to be done right. Jacob asked, can you discuss Hamas's strength in the West Bank? That's a very complicated question. So first of all, in terms of polls, Hamas is ridiculously popular in the West Bank now, significantly more popular than it is in Gaza because, the poor Gazans have to live with the consequences of Hamas's policy. But there's a few caveats to that. There are local terrorist groups that don't particularly like Hamas that are very strong in the West Bank. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the Lions Den group and other independent militias control the Jenin refugee camp and a lot of other major spots in the West Bank. And of course, they're aided to some extent. These other organizations are aided by the Palestinian Authority and its troops that also try to keep Hamas down so that they're not replaced. I mean, every PA official remembers the pictures of their colleagues in Gaza being thrown from roofs and dragged through the streets, and they don't want to see that happen. So Hamas is very popular, but it doesn't actually control the terrorist operations in the West Bank in the same way that it does in Gaza. And I think that if Israel defeats Hamas and humiliates Hamas, and again, it's the Middle East, it's important to humiliate Hamas and show that their way doesn't lead anywhere good, the popularity of Hamas in the West Bank will decline. If Israel loses in Gaza, their popularity will increase even more to the point where I don't know if any other group is going to be able to challenge them. And hopefully the reform of the PA that Israel will be working towards will strengthen the PA vis-a-vis Hamas. A combination of those two things, that with a Hamas defeat, may actually start to turn the tide. So I'm not completely pessimistic, but it's important that we win and that we push for reform. Final question from Cool Snow 7. If you read Amos Harel's column, you see that he thinks of Hamas's strategy as, we accomplished what we wanted, now let's hide in the tunnels until the US tells Israel to leave. Is it feasible for Hamas to hunker down in Khan Yunis for a month or more without Israel rooting them out? No. If there's anything I've seen from the Israeli operations in Khan Yunis, it's that they're locating these tunnels. Israel has maps of the tunnels. They're starting to use seawater to flood the tunnels. They're starting to use cement and explosives to shut them off, blow them up. The tunnel system is turning into a death trap for terrorists. Sure, there's sections that are still standing and they're hiding in, but it's only a matter of time till they're found, till they're collapsed. Basically, since it's not going to be safe in there, more and more terrorists are going to come out. And that's what we've been seeing. And that's why, according to the latest estimates of the IDF, 7,000 Hamas terrorists, or I should say terrorists from all the groups, have been killed so far in the operation. And that's because they haven't been able to find a refuge to wait this out. So I'm sure that the leadership is in better sections of the tunnels, more secure, deeper, etc. And maybe individuals can hide out or will leave the country. But as an organization, as a military organization that will try to maintain grip over the entire region, you can't do that when you're holed up in increasingly isolated and smaller sections of the tunnels. So I really don't think that they can wait out the operation. And in addition, even though the United States has put together a timetable saying that Israel needs to stop this phase of the operation within a month or so, that's this phase of the operation. It's been made clear by Israel and the US that after that, the combat will continue at a lower level of intensity. So the efforts to root out the tunnels will continue. And Israel's discovered maps of the tunnel system. It's getting more and more efficient at taking them out. So I absolutely don't think that Hamas can just wait out the operation. There's nothing to wait out. Israel's going to be there for a long, long time, no matter what the day after the war looks like. Okay, so that's the end of this video. If you have any comments or questions, I'll answer them in the next one. Remember to subscribe to this channel and tell all your friends about it. See you next time.